Good afternoon, and welcome to the Big Picture Revealed show. And today's topic is astrology and reincarnation, a very interesting topic. And of course, our host, the one and only Michael O'Connor, the holistic astrologer, is back with us today to edify us on this very interesting topic. So, Michael, how did you come to this topic of all topics?
Thanks, Tyson. Astrology is so naturally and classically connected to reincarnation. The very theme or the very core principle of the archetypal nature of astrology, the paradigm of astrology, okay, how and why it works. So we can use all these terms, the cosmology, the paradigm, the reality. Technical difficulty here, 1 second. Okay, why is that happening? Okay, sorry about that. All right. I don't know what you're seeing, but my screen is doing something.
You're good on our end. We can see you live and hear you well. So
okay,
carry on.
All right. So yeah, what's happening here with the astrology, the cosmology, the worldview of astrology itself incorporates an understanding of a multidimensional universe, a conscious universe, that we are conscious beings in consciousness. This is where we get the holes within holes principle. So when we understand that, and this is the ancient understanding, the perennial philosophy, which has been questioned in modern history in the past 5 centuries with the rise of the scientific revolution, and that has its place and its time, but it doesn't dismiss this deeper reality, this deeper truth. It's a little bit like I was going down the street the other day, and there was this beautiful building, and it has all the old stones, and at some point in the past number of decades, it was sort of in vogue to plaster over them, right? So the beautiful stones were plastered over. So now you see it all coming back. They're chipping off the plaster. They go, oh, that was a nice little 1960s moment or 70s or something. But now, we're getting back to the real McCoy. What's the stone really? And it's back, So I would like to offer that is making its way back right now in history. People are getting a little tired of kind of being sold and told on a purely materialistic mindset. And there's a lot of, in this Aquarian age, we're in this knowledge revolution, a revolution of information, and it's making its way back. So now the main point is, though, that astrology in its archetypal reality is excuse me, there's some things happening. There are some technical difficulties. It's been happening all day. We had our power go out. So what I have to do here is a couple of quick things, and I do apologize for this, but I'm going to do it real quick. And I'll get back to, so everybody just bear with just one quick moment, and we're going to address this.
So just while Michael's doing that, if you're listening to the show, the intention with today's show is a new format, in the sense that we're going to have a half-hour conversation about this, and then we're open to having you phone in and ask questions, or to type in your questions into Facebook, and we'll pick them up there. Or you can actually click the link wherever you're watching the show. You'll see that there's a Be Live link that if you click, you will actually be able to join us on the show and ask your question that way. And you can arrive either by your smartphone or or on your webcam on your computer. So there's 3 ways that you can show up and ask questions in the last half hour. Phone in toll free 1-866-369-7464, or leave your comments in the Facebook group. So back to you, Michael. Did you get everything reorganized?
Basically, I did. Thanks. All right. Yes, I'm just going to do something. Here we go. And we are back. Okay. Good. Now I just got to bring you back up on screen. Okay, there we go. So getting back to it, the paradigm of astrology and reincarnation go hand in hand. Too often astrology is depicted as sort of a fortune-telling device, and it is a tool that can, look into the future. It's true, but it looks deeply into people, and it looks very deeply into people in terms of being able, in fact, to gain glimpses on past life energies and patterns. And it doesn't see specifically past lives as who you were and where you lived and so on, but it does show indications of tendencies and involvements and karmic patterns. So reincarnation is a feature of astrology by virtue of the cosmology, the worldview, the paradigm upon which astrology rests, which is a holistic paradigm. And the holistic paradigm, once again, honors that we not only have consciousness, but we literally live in consciousness. And consciousness manifests in a multidimensional way. Okay, so there's layers and levels of existence, just as there's levels within everything, from the molecular to all the stages, or we even look at our own body, and everything has layers. And everything in existence has layers. So the same thing is true in terms of dimensionality. Okay, so we live in a multidimensional universe, and we're multidimensional beings. And we, in the deepest reaches of our existence, we are souls incarnate. So we're souls in duality. Now, as soon as you enter into a discussion of the word soul, if you're discussing it in a responsible, mature, sincere way, you're not talking about groovy or music or cool, that's so soulful. It's almost like saying so sexy, which is fine. You can use the word however you wish. But if you want to get to the serious understanding of the term, the soul represents what I actually interpret to be sort of the personality of the spirit. Okay. And the spirit is like the divine spark. The soul has a quality of individuality, okay, in it. And this individuality that it is has a record of its existence. Like, this is what we get to the Akashic record principle. The Akashic records can be seen in 2 ways. It's the record of all things that have ever occurred in existence on the planet, for example, right? The planet has its own Akashic records, which is a really exciting thought for historian buffs. Wow, you can finally get the answer or answers if you go into the Hall of Records. It's been shown in different ways. But personally, we also have our own personal history. Now, what this is suggesting is that as souls incarnate, we reincarnate. Transmigration of the soul. But you have to think on a soul level, or from a soul perspective, to understand that. If you think from your ego, which is normally how we do, it doesn't make sense. I've talked to people that say, well, it doesn't make sense that I'd be born as me again. I'm like, no, it doesn't quite work that way. It's a little bit more complicated. You see, what happens is the soul takes on a different incarnation. So it takes on a new set of genes in a new time, in a new place. And it does that for the sake of experience. So this kind of thinking now, we're in the body, we're in existence, we're in the world to grow and evolve, to have experiences. And we recognize that there's a purpose, there's an end or a meaning to it. The meaning is we're here to have meaningful experiences based on growth and evolution. And then we call this the evolution of the soul. Now, technically, that's somewhat, well, I think there's a lot of accuracy in that. It's funny to say, it gets a little complicated here because yes, it's the best way. The soul is accumulating and absorbing those experiences is the idea. And then it stores that wisdom of those experiences, what to do, what not to do, or strengths, gifts, abilities, attributes. Ultimately, the takeaway are the goodies. The goodies. It's like eating. You want the food to be turned into healthy blood and so on, right? Which then goes into the process of creating healthy tissues and organs and so forth. Okay, good. So it's the takeaway is the goodies. But along the way, there's also, the not so good. The not so good is kind of what would be called, whether it's positive or negative, the repercussions of our experiences produce karma. So the karma is basically, in a classical dualistic sense, it's negative and positive. Now, it may be said, and it's true, there's also the in between. It's like there's the two poles, one pole left, one pole right. We have two extremes of extreme good and extreme, let's say, bad, but there's more than not, there's everything in between, so the point is, we, through our experiences in time and space, every action, every thought, everything is being measured. It's just like right now, if you had a recording device on and you had a camera on you, it's recording everything. Now, if you understand that you live in consciousness, and consciousness therefore records, it's easy for us to think of cameras and recording devices in a building and it's recording everything going on, but it's a little harder to imagine that consciousness is like a non-material, non-physical radar field. There's nothing it's not picking up. It's not judging. It's kind of morally neutral. It's like the camera and the tape recorder or the digital recorder is not judging you. It's just recording you. But there is this notion spiritually, religiously, of judgment. The judgment is kind of an assessment, a weighing. It gets misinterpreted at worst. And, church officials, they take a true, priests and so on, they take a good principle, but then they interpret it in such a way personally. And then how they translate that to the average person can get complicated, So in other words, when I look at an astrology chart, I can see a very strong signature of what would be called karma. Everything in the chart, everything in an astrology chart represents a cause and effect principle. Everything in its karma. It's measuring a karmic result on one hand of where you've been, and not just, but largely illustrating past, like most immediate life tendencies, but it's not easy to discern because it's an accumulative process through many lifetimes. But the most recent lifetime has a big echo, big one. That's a nice way of basically saying an echo. And then we come, so the chart is showing characteristics and, basically personality, temperament. We look at the chart, personality, temperament, proclivity. Oh, you tend to be athletic. Oh, you tend to be intellectual. Oh, you tend to be depressed. Oh, you tend to, and there's a list of these things. Your temperament, your personality, your proclivities, what you're attracted to, what interests you, what are your talents. It shows a full spectrum. Most people kind of get that with astrology. Wow, it shows that? My God. Yeah, it does really well. But it goes deeper. It starts looking at even you as a soul and where you're at in your journey. And it says it'll show what credits you have, which will manifest as talents. and or debits, which are where you have work to do, where there's lessons, where there's harder limitations. Or so what you're hearing now, just to differentiate something, we have come to a place in time in history where we assume those personality traits, those proclivities are all, and so on, are genetically driven solely. And that is not true. It is not true, and it's very demonstrably not true. You can go to families and see how certain members of the family just don't quite fit, or it just doesn't make sense that they come from that family. And there was, so you think, well, how does that work? And it's quite complex, admittedly. But the main point is, nobody's arguing that we don't have genetic inheritance, but the inheritance is not solely and purely genetic. That's the materialistic model, and it assumes that it's an assumption. It operates off of that a priori assumption. Astrology says no, there's something else going on. There's a deeper story here, and it goes into the transmigration of the soul principle, and it's measurable. Now, so you can see a chart, you can measure and see the karma. People do have free will, we do, and we can choose to work with what we have. But some people will say, well, I'm a healer and I'm going to clear all your karma. And I would say, looking at them, I'd say, no, you're not. You're not going to do that. You might try. You can clear some of the repercussions. You can clean the house. You can, but you are not going to change the foundation. You are not, now people could say, well, can I renovate the house? And I'd say, yes. Will that have an effect on the karma? I'd say, yes. Will that get rid of the karma? No. It will only alleviate some of the impact of it. And actually, that's one of the goals. I have a reading that I do. It's called Give It To Me Straight. Now, I don't do this reading usually for anybody first time round. It's too much for them. It's like, because I'm going to dive in and start telling them about challenging karma, for example. In the paradigm, though, the average person is operating from their ego, even though they might consider themselves spiritual. I'm not really religious, I'm spiritual. Okay. But there's usually, unless you really exercise a lot of awareness and determination, and you have some objective tool like astrology, it's hard not to have your ego in there. So I'm not suggesting that's bad, but the ego is frail, and it doesn't like discomfort. It doesn't like anything that's not flowing. It's natural. We want things to work. We want things to flow. And in so many ways in life, they do. But when you start to understand that the chart, the archetypal symbols within the chart illustrate realities that you are going to, like temperament and personality and proclivity, that you are very likely going to experience. Like it's going to talk at a high level of probability. The danger in astrology is with other things, is just be careful how you say that, so you don't want to negatively auto-suggest. Okay, you got to be careful. But you can see, like, for example, let's say I took a chart of a famous person. Let's say Jennifer Aniston, right? I can clearly show you this famous, lovely lady, right? Born with all the privileges, has rather difficult karma, not surprisingly, in her astrology, evident, measurable, demonstrable, clear with relationships. Everybody basically knows nobody has more press in North America probably, and maybe other parts of the world, about how difficult their relationship life is. There are other actors and actresses are up there too, but she's big. She's a good example, right? She's almost everybody's little sweetheart, and everybody's like, oh my God, this woman, you know? And you think, is this just tabloid trash? No, it's happening. She is having those difficulties, right? She's not, and this is nothing against her. Just so happens she's famous and her astrology chart's available. And that's true of many famous people. So you can take famous people and you go, I'm going to show you whatever, we're going to depict the chart, and we should do that soon. I'll illustrate what constitutes the negative karma. Now, the challenge there is that if you don't know the language of astrology, you wouldn't really understand. That's a little bit of a challenge, admittedly. It's like saying, if I wasn't able to read music and you wrote a musical score that was really terrible and, you know, kind of illogical and so forth, then I wouldn't know the difference, right? You know, I wouldn't know. So there's a certain amount of limitation unless people know the language of astrology. So the point, though, is the astrology chart reveals karmic patterns that can be described best as inherited from past lives. So I like to say there's a bit of a paradoxical statement. It goes like this. We do not have, as who you are in your body, in your genetics, and who I am in my body and genetics, etc. We technically don't have future and past lives, but our soul does. Our soul is that essence of us, the spirit aspect of us, that the timeless self that takes on incarnation and after incarnation. It takes a remarkable amount of effort to detach or to see through your own personality embodiment. Like, in other words, you can't really entirely do it. Like, invariably, you have your own genetic code, your conditioning, your perceptions, etc. So this is where we get into notions of deep meditation. The deep meditation is supposed to enter you into states of consciousness where the ego state is left behind, and now you're in a more pure state of consciousness. And there's different levels of benefits, and I'm not going to try and outline them out right now, but the benefits of meditation are many, and one of them is that it enters a person into finer states of consciousness, etc. Okay, we'll say that briefly. So, the soul.
So, Michael, we have a guest that's shown up that's in the lobby section. Would you like me to bring the guest on? Maybe Minnie Palmer has a question that they'd like to ask you.
If anybody has a question, sure.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to bring
Nina.
So if you can hear me as I bring you on, if you could move away from the window, it was much easier to see you when the window was not behind you. There you are, even a little bit more.
Hey there.
So welcome to the show.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
That's all right.
That's all right. So do you have a question for Michael at this point?
I'm just really checking in. I don't really know too much about the topic and other than what I just heard. So I'm just tapping in right now.
All right. Well, we'll let you tap in there, and we'll let Michael continue on. And if you have something that you'd like to ask, then feel free to pipe up. We'll just leave you right there, and you're right beside us and listening in and live on the show.
Great.
All right. So back over to you, Michael.
Okay. Thanks, Tyson. Yeah, you know, I was just saying there that as once again, astrology, the paradigm of astrology, reveals a deeper perspective on existence than the empirical scientific model, which is not to say it dismisses it. It just includes a much deeper, wider understanding of who we are. It all comes down to who we are as beings. And the answer basically is that all human beings are souls incarnate. As souls, that from a soul perspective, we have a timelessness to us. We journey through time and space, taking on incarnation after incarnation based on a plan, a purpose to evolve through experiences. So we're evolving through time and space, and we're taking on incarnations. Now, in any incarnation, once again, we have our ego body, personality, and it's hard to get past that. So we can honor that. This is who we are in this life, and there's a lot of value in that. When we start to look deeper, we realize, wow, it's like saying, I don't just have a soul. The soul has me. It's a reverse. I'm not just a human being and questioning whether I have a spirit or a soul or not. I'm a spiritual being having human experience. We hear that out there these days. There's a lot of people that are aware and awake to that. I'm a spiritual being having human experience. Now, when we get into the implication of it, we start to go, okay, the implication is that we're evolving through time and space, and we have karmas. The karmas can be difficult. And if you really look at a chart and you start to look at the karma, you can start to become more objectively aware of what you're dealing with. And the karma is going to attract, like we were saying last week in synchronicity, it's going to attract you to and attract to you by synchronicity types of experiences, not just episodic, oh, today this happened. I'm talking about the deeper experiences of your life. Now, admittedly, we always want to throw in that we have free will, but the probability curve of our life and destiny is very strong. People say in Hollywood, I create my own destiny. The answer is no. No. You may participate in the creation of your destiny, but you don't just create destiny. That's just an ego statement. You might create your own luck, but it's not the same thing as saying you create your own destiny. So it gets a bit tricky here, but the main point to understand is that we're souls incarnate. Now, another worthwhile consideration astrologically. So the chart reveals the karmic code, the good, the bad, the ugly, or shall we just say the positive and the negative and everything in between. It shows that, measurable. Interesting. The other thing to give consideration to now is that just because in astrology we have Aries through Pisces, Aries would be called the first sign of the zodiac, Pisces is the last sign. It would be tempting sometimes to think, therefore, Aries is sort of a baby soul and Pisces is an old soul. That is definitely not true. It's not like that at all. It's not linear. So in other words, you can have an enlightened Aries and a very unevolved Pisces, for example. And that could be true of a very evolved Taurus and a very unevolved Aquarius, for example. So you can't think linearly when you think about astrology and the 12 signs of the archetypes. How the planets are depicted in the astrology chart can strongly indicate the soul level, though, by the way. I've been challenged by astrologers. They say you can't see the soul level in the chart. And I look at them, I say, no, you can't, but I can. And you can. You can see the high likelihood of what the soul is. Now, what you want to understand here is that there's different models for understanding this. The one I work with goes like this. We all have 7 major archetypes to master. The 12 signs of the zodiac are more representative of our embodied self, the full range of personality, structures, and so forth. But this other model is sort of like the 7 rays of light, the 7 bandwidths within the light spectrum. We have to master all 7. It's kind of nice that way. Mastering each one, according to the model I follow, takes about 100 to 120 lives. Just like the Buddhists say, we have a kind of a long journey, something to the tune of 800 to 1,000 lives to graduate from the Earth School. Oh, now this is a different conversation. You go, well, that's quite a few lives. Yeah. And it also dismisses the notion of people will say, I'll see their chart. I can see they might be having difficult life, difficult karma. They'll go, well, this is my last life. And I'm going, well, not necessarily my place. And I might not say anything, but sometimes I do. I go, no, it's not. And that sounds a little strong. But look, the idea would be, if you're a very evolved, enlightened being, first of all, that would be evident to everybody. And secondly, you wouldn't be saying that. You wouldn't be doing that kind of, I'm out of here, kind of thing. I'm checking, this is it, I'm done, I quit, kind of thing. It would be a little different than that. You would be in a different kind of state of consciousness. This is the
Can I interject for a second?
Sure.
So do you ever reference, when someone says past life, do you ever reference north node, south node?
Oh, yeah. The north node, south node, yes, for sure, Mina. The south node planet, the south node is one of the strongest indications of where you come from in a past life. It's not the only thing, but it's a very strong indication of some of your proclivities and tendencies. Yes, definitely. And the north node represents what you're here to integrate into your life to either, well, there's a few principles. Sometimes it's to continue to integrate that principle, and sometimes it's to counter the other principle. It's a little bit like, I always call it like making a snowball. You're kind of like patting,
The treat.
Pardon me?
Like the antidote.
It's the antidote is a good way. It's just a balance scale principle. Yes, it goes back and forth. It's very all about kind of creating a nice symmetry. And yes, so the north node, south node are very significant. And it's actually, that's where Eastern and Western astrology rather significantly meet. Like, in other words, Mayan astrology does not have a north and a south node. Chinese astrology does not have a north and a south node. It's interesting to note. Western and Vedic astrology do, and they're like brother and sister in a way. They're very much the same on one hand, but rather distinctly different in various ways. But anyway, I appreciate all systems like sitar, guitar, mandolin, and anything else you want to call a different instrument is an instrument, and you can make beautiful music with each of them if you're good at it, right? And with meaning and purpose, etc. So I'm never about the one. So yes, the answer is yes. So the idea now, by the way, the archetypal model I follow for the soul types that you have to master is that there's basically 7, and they are described as kings and warriors, artisans and sages, priests and servers. That's 6. And the 7th one are called scholars. And the idea of this model is you'll start off as an, so you start off as an infant soul. When we say infant soul, it's not quite accurate. The soul is ageless and timeless, but the soul in its incarnational journey will start off at an infant stage and go through that. And each stage has 7 rungs on its ladder. It's like you have to go to 7 grades, and then you graduate from infant stage. Then you go to baby, then you go to young, then mature, then old. Okay, so there's 5, infant, baby, young, mature, old, and then each one has 7 rungs, and each rung can take 2 or 3 lives to achieve. And sometimes a person could even get caught on one to be there for 8 lives. It's a tragedy almost, but they do. And that's where they have deep psychological problems. So this takes a whole new look at psychology.
So are you using Jungian are you using the archetypes from a Jungian perspective, or are you using a different type of archetypal format?
It's important to note Jung did not create archetypes, right? He coined terms, but he invented maybe terms, and I appreciate that. he was a student of the occult. He was a abnormal psychologist, right? That's how he began, and in institutions and everything. And then in the course of his life, in his search for truth, he found himself in the arena of metaphysics and occultism. And that's where his real wisdom came from, actually, I would offer, at least quite significantly. And he began to understand principles like synchronicity, archetypes, as above, so below. So the answer is, I'm not subscribed strictly to Jungian thinking, strictly. Not that I dismiss or I think it's wonderful, by the way. I do. But astrology, there's many astrologers who actually work with archetypal, Jungian archetypes, by the way. So they kind of cross over. Archetypes in astrology are like the archetype of Aries, the archetype of Pisces, etc. Or the archetype of Saturn, the archetype, the archetypal, the symbol, has an archetypal principle, which means there's a lot in it. For one, the symbol means there's a lot in it. And the archetype means it's like a blueprint principle. It's a fundamental principle of existence. Jungian archetype kind of comes in and starts talking about a little bit like the king and, like you said, the pauper, and I appreciate that. Yes. The model I'm using isn't in that particular tradition. I've discovered another model, and it's you can go on, like, if you're a psychologist, you can go into Jungian psychoanalysis processes, which I'm sure can be quite beneficial for people. Wonderful. But and yeah, there's lots to be said about those things. Astrology is done in different forms, in different ways. The most superficial is, even though it's technically, it takes a fair amount of knowledge to work the technical aspects of prediction in astrology. Ironically, it's some of the more superficial side of it. The deeper side of astrology is really, who are you? Who are you? Why are you here? What is your destiny? What are your karma? And if you take the time to really look at that, you really care to understand yourself that way, you go, wow, holy smokes, this really sees me. Often it's not practiced that way, I've noticed. That's the branch of astrology I've taken, which is, it's basically described as humanistic, or it can be called humanistic or evolutionary astrology. It requires a little bit more investment on the part of, and I'm not talking just money, I'm talking about more focus by the client. In other words, you could go to astrologer and just get a little bit of an update and a little bit of a gee whiz forecast for next week, year, or whatever. But if you look at it from the standpoint of a deep look at who you are, what constitutes your destiny and karma, oh boy, and you're going to get results, and it's going to, be able to demonstrate that that's happening in your life. It'll show again, you also want to keep in we have free will. So how we choose to respond to things is open-ended, and what are the circumstances of our life are not altogether entirely indicated in the chart, strictly speaking. It's important to note that. So it's not in any way absolute. Okay. But it does have like an X-ray machine ability to see into who you are, where you're at in time, what constitutes your destiny, what constitutes what could be called better choices, like more in alignment with, and this is rather important, like what, in a way, I'm talking, like, what comes to mind here is that it's a classical, there's the individual and then there's the collective. And they it's like they work together like a circle with the point in the center. They're very closely connected. The individual can examine their life in a very individuated way and exercise their free will choices in various ways. But invariably, there's also the social, what could be in the largest sense, the human condition, where humanity's at, what's going on, what the drama is. But in a Shakespearean kind of mindset, it's timeless truths keep repeating themselves. Like, in other words, men and women, power, advantage, opportunity, intrigue, benevolence, manipulation, all of those would be called archetypal themes. The human story has, even though we can weave it and interpret it through books and various methods in different ways, that's where we go back to a type of Shakespearean model, for example, right? And that's where we get Jungian too. Jungian, Shakespearean, or even astrological. We go, this is kind of bringing us back to that place of reminding ourselves of fundamentals. Or we could even take a Taoist model, yin, yang, start very fundamentally and build from there. So it rather quickly becomes quite a complex story. What we're trying to say, what I'm saying here, the main point remains this: astrology significantly, and almost all astrologers, but not all, almost all, strongly celebrate and recognize and work on the understanding that they're looking at the astrology chart, which is an archetypal map of this incarnation. It's the soul, by virtue of karma and destiny, having a life plan, a contract, and it's here to experience and live out that plan or contract. What's in the plan or contract shouldn't just be considered to be what you chose in the afterlife or the between lives. Not that simple. It's a byproduct of the way you lived your life, the quality of the choices you made. So that's where it comes back to the now and the game, and how are you choosing? And okay, so your chart shows a probability of what you will choose and so forth, but possibility ever remains. But the main point remains that we're souls incarnate and we reincarnate, and we carry within that deeper understanding karmas and destiny. And within the two of those, I always like to say free will is a feature, a fundamental feature of destiny. So free will and destiny polarized is a wrong argument. No, it's not that. It's like saying, we don't want to say there's free will, so there's no destiny, or vice versa. No, what we want to say is, by your destiny, how are you exercising your free will? You see, the quality of your ability to use, or how you use your free will, represents various levels of wisdom. It's not to say it's hard. You don't want to bring in too many value judgments. It's everybody's letting everybody do their thing by and large, but in the game of life, there's invariably entanglements and complexities due to relationships. But even in your natal chart, it'll show you what kind of the quality and or the flow or the challenges you're destined to have in your relationships. They'll even show that. You have to, but it takes time to really deeply understand what it's showing you. Sometimes you can say it, but you have to experience it. So I'll add one more little piece here. we have our core nature. You and I, and each and every one of us, since we were children, we have this essentially core sense of who we are and how we are. This is who we are, right? Then that's our core nature, and it shows that core nature reflected in the astrology chart really quite wonderfully. Not absolutely. It's not seeing your genetics. It's not seeing, strictly speaking, all the details of your circumstance, but it's seeing a lot. Okay, you want to make sure of those two statements. Then, in the course of life, we're in time and space, and time should best be understood as cyclic. So there's cycles. So astrology is very much just like the circle behind me. It's the cycle, and the cycle can be seen in having, a beginning point, a peak point, and in between points. The beginning point of a cycle is symbolic like a new moon. The peak point's the full moon, and then there's all the phases in between, waxing and waning. And that's the most basic way to understand a cycle, that it has a waxing side and a waning side, a beginning and a peak point. And then it's a very complex and interesting thing to observe the synchronicity, as I said last week. Oh my God, we can measure this. It's not like one, it's like having a map. It's not like one should necessarily be staring at the map, of course. You drive, you go with this is where we get into this notion of follow your heart, go with intuition, trust your instincts, use your reason, all good, right? Use all your faculties, go with the flow. Life has a way of kind of working in its natural flow. Just, trust that it's good. But part of the thing with astrology, once again, is you can see what's happening. You can. And you can go deep. Deep. So you can use it, healing as a tool for healing, or you could go into a deeper understanding of your karma or your relationships or what constitutes, good career directions. What it won't do, of course, it can show you all these things like a map, but it can't change the outer reality for you. That's where free will comes in. Like, in other words, if we have a career destiny that's looking good, but we kind of live in a place where it can't happen, we might find, the astrology doesn't work. Well, no. You have to be sensible about things. Like, you're not going to be a captain of a boat in the desert. It's not going to work very well. It sounds a little obvious and silly to say that, but it's just to remind you of the obvious. So that's basically it. That's what astrology is, that wonderful and that powerful. That's why one of the reasons I'm so gaga about it. It's powerful in that it represents the spiritual paradigm and an evolutionary plan. And it gives dignity to life and to human beings, in that it illustrates that we live in a conscious, intelligent, intentional, purposeful universe. It becomes, in effect, spiritual. The conspiracy of our day in this day and age is that doesn't meet well with those who want power all the time. They don't want you in, it's powerful power, or call it control, whatever you want. Fear, we can call it fear, control, corruption, whatever. It kind of, for people call it satanic, whatever you want to call it. It kind of has this agenda of coercing things to its advantage. Wants to, make everything work. And this is where we are in history and time, where people, we can talk about secret societies and ancient orders and cabals or mafia networks, just mafia, but mafia, right? Organized crime. It's pretty obvious and evident it's happening. And these forces don't, at a very high or deep, shall we say, level, they might not want you having that knowledge and power, I think. That's where it starts to get challenged. They go, that astrology,
Well,
You
it's
know,
exactly the system that they're using to control.
without, and
Esoteric arts.
sadly, you're right. Yes. So
You have to
Yeah,
remember that.
the
yeah, which
conspiracy.
really behooves us to understand it and take responsibility for our ability to show up with that wisdom as a more intelligent, counter benevolent force, right?
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yes, it's being used. Astrology is powerful, and you can use it to predict probabilities, and it works. It's I'm just scratching the surface of the science of astrology. It's really remarkably wonderful. You have to understand symbolic, like philosophy almost. You have to understand the paradigm of it okay, it's not rocket science to do that, but it does take a certain amount of time to develop a insight about that. Okay. Dedicated time frame, just like playing the piano, if you like. It's just not something you're going to do sitting down today, although some are more gifted, etc. But basically, yes, it could be used wrongly, or call it negatively, coercively, corruptedly, and it is. It is. So it's like a power you don't want others to know about because you want advantage, and that starts becoming kind of, I don't know whether you call it like a sickness. Uh, how do we define that? People call it satanic, sick.
Occult.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
People call it like
Cult.
a cult, as opposed to study or science or
Oh yeah.
astrology or arts, healing arts. There's like negative connotations in certain descriptions, like when you hear occultism, and a lot of people don't acknowledge people like us as using this knowledge for good. There's a lot of focus right now on the esoteric arts having been taken over by the cabal, it seems.
Yes. It's very complex times we live in, because again, the human condition is subject to different groups of people, like birds of a feather gather. And when I said infant, baby, young, mature, old souls, there's actually certain qualities within each category.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Baby souls actually are very mainstream, family-based, black and white, follow the rules, kind of, okay. And so they'll usually turn themselves to religion and church authorities, who can themselves be corrupt, as we saw, like, say, in the Da Vinci Code. It's the whole Dan Brown thing, and as one example of many, illustrating that, things aren't quite what we thought. There's corruption even in the places we think it should not be, like the church. So benevolence is no longer quite benevolence. And whether we talk, the marriage of church and state and the corruptions, and oh my God, we all know it's a nasty, dirty mess.
And yet there are a lot of awakening, like people who are involved in the awakening, the Great Awakening movement, that are religious, and they are doing great things. It's just kind of hard to relate to them because they only see the salvation or the answers being Jesus Christ. And so they think everything else is heresy, and it's hard to relate to them even though I'm working with them.
It's exactly it. It becomes a very contrived, confused, mixed up bag of everything from, and dark force or dark energy will use that. Like, in other words, the very notion of what we're talking about today, astrology and reincarnation. And I was posted online on my Facebook page, Sunstar Astrology. I made a comment about Stephen Hawking, who just died yesterday, and he said, he basically presented the classical materialistic atheistic position, and I said, no, I don't think so. You're a scientist, but what you're saying is all belief and conjecture, and it's not science, so whatever. And secondly, I also illustrated quickly that what's historically known as the Council of Nicaea when Rome basically adopted Christianity, somewhere within that arena, about 3 to 5 century AD, they took out reincarnation from the Bible, for example, right? And okay, so it then suddenly it kind of dumbed it down. It dumbed down the whole system, which was based on a complex historical principle, by the way, called divine right of kings. In other words, if the Pope is closer to God than anybody else, the kings come next. So, but if reincarnation says, and karmic law says, oh, sorry, you can go from prince to pauper really quick. Like you can fall down the snake in the Snakes and Ladders board. You know, you're not, you know, your actions are not divinely sanctioned. That's politics. You see, like they'll go, oh, I'm the prince. I can do anything. I'm closer to God. I'm favored. But the idea of metaphysics says, no. It goes, you don't quite understand. That's just your ego. And what it really is vibration. It's just energy. It says either you were in a state of unity consciousness and you functioned accordingly, or you were in separation consciousness. And extreme separation consciousness could be, well, in the extreme of it would be pure psychopathic. An extremely separated consciousness would be narcissistic, worse. It could be, you know, homicidal psychopathic, because the ego, extreme separation consciousness is massive ego. And ego is survival based and win or lose consciousness. Where we get into a higher consciousness, we get into a deep sense of unity, we get into contribution, we get into meaning, we get into a deeper understanding of spiritual law. Anyway, all of everything I just said is showing that in humanity, the human condition in the world right now is dealing with a lot of different camps. There's the fundamentalist religious camp, whether it's Christian, Islam, or what have you. There's the religious camps. There's the science camps. There's the metaphysical camp, and within each camp, and there's more. There's levels. There's extreme fundamentalists, and then there's, you know, moderate fundamentalists, right? So the point is, oh my God, we'll get exhausted talking about the different layers. The thing, though, I want to offer here, though, that's an important little consideration is that the evolutionary journey doesn't look for resolution. It's not looking for utopia. It's not looking for, oh, it'll always be wonderful in a year or 10. It's actually, in a funny sort of language, in a funny sort of mindset, it's all good, because every dynamic, like the whole world drama, human condition right now, is a rich arena of opportunity for experience. And from that perspective, that's all that matters. It's like saying, you know what? Just work with what you got, because you can
It's all
evolve.
happening automatically.
It's
I like to
happening.
say that. It's all happening automatically.
Yeah.
You know?
It's happening automatically, and you not only can, you are invariably evolving within it right now. And what constitutes a wholesome, healthy evolution now is another conversation. Like, for example,
Yeah, I think that's an important conversation. I think fundamentally it comes back to the wisdom of knowing your astrological position via the planets and all the rest allows you to have some conscious choices that comes from a deeper awareness of your soul contract and why you're here, and that it behooves all of us to know that we do have those choices and that we can make those choices very wisely, which then can actually change not only our destiny, but the destiny. And this is the exciting time that I think that we're in, is that we get to play. We get to play as wise participants if we so choose.
Yeah, that's always been available, I think. And you're right. Astrology, what its great value is it provides valuable insight and knowledge like a map, but it's an archetypal map. And it's just a tool that works. So on one hand, it's just a powerful tool. So it's a tool, but we can say it's just a tool, but it's just a powerful tool. It is. It's a powerful tool. Okay, great. And we can use that tool to better understand who we are, why we're here, where we're at, where we're going, what's next. And that can be quite valuable, quite useful. And, it's just like pulling over when you're on a road trip and or you check the map every now and then. And it just becomes a very useful tool. But on the other hand, okay, tool. That it works, and this is the two ways I like to interpret it. Okay, tool, functional, practical. That it works at all in terms of consciousness, in terms of understanding who we are and how life works, is nothing short of A, revolutionary, and B, illuminating. When you dig down, you go, oh my God, this works, and how it works and why it works comes full circle and goes, see, we're souls incarnate. It really does. It comes that fast and goes, we are conscious beings living in consciousness, and there's a rhyme and reason to it all. And it suddenly, we enter into a different mindset. Now you're not simply, if I may, I'm going to say, sorry, but not simply seeking to be saved. Now you're, in the game in a more intentional, conscious, deliberate way. And, you're becoming a conscious co-creator. And I know, and anybody who just wants to be saved, it's fine. I don't really want to say that they shouldn't feel that way. No, it's fine. If that's the way, it's fine, because but the deeper truth would be, I would maintain that as a soul incarnate who's destined to reincarnate, it's okay. As a soul, you'll be back. And it's not a revenge. It's not meant to be snide. It's just that it's a little difficult to prove that. And so in the end of the day, it's not something you want to overly try and convince another person that they must believe. It's just not going to happen. So,
well, if you are coming back, then it's probably worth your while to get it right while you're here.
Getting it right, just to add a few, it's more like we're here to become wise and able. And so I like to use the phrase mastery of the various, but it's really an accumulation of many, many experiences. Like I said earlier, the food of life, there's literal food creating blood, but there's experiential food. And the soul accumulates and integrates those experiences. So it kind of paints a picture that it's all valuable. It's not so much
no judgment on it, right or wrong. It just is, you're gathering wisdom.
It's a gathering. So that's where people who say life's just an experience, they're right to a certain extent. But I would just want to eliminate limiting to merely, experiences having, it seems to suggest there's meaningless. So where we bring meaningful back is where we go, oh, yeah, yes, it's about experiences, but that there's these deep, valuable takeaways. And how you measure them is a bit tricky. There's everything, for example, and I'll say a few examples. There's ability, like skill, high-level artistry of some kind, or high-level skill. But there's also, on the other end of the scale, more simple, basic things like patience, sacrifice, the more everyday, simple little things matter too, right? It's not all under the big tent.
Mhm.
It's the full, everything has, meaning. That's where I like that. It's all good, it's all God, it's all meaningful, it's all purposeful. But in a very personal sense, how are you? How are you doing? How are you doing? And the game of life is such that fear kind of wants to coerce others into its mindset. I would like to think myself love inspires, kind of inspiring you. Hey, I want to feel
Well,
like.
notice how the hands, there was a thing about body mechanics and how we use our creativity, our hands, right in front of our hearts most of the time.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's like, this is where we create conscious creation, is right in front of our heart center. So it's an interesting way of thinking about consciousness and creation.
Yes. You have it's sometimes, it's funny that we all make assumptions, and when I hear you say that, I know that you possess, a deeper understanding of the soul and the chakras, right? You have that level of consciousness. Can I say that? Is that when you're referring in a way to like heart chakra? Would that be correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's what
There was
I'm.
something I watched the other day about, and it was like just really struck a
Nice.
chord, because it was talking about what chakra is being shut down these days or controlled, and it's definitely in the heart chakra and the will chakra, those two, and we're in the receiving side of the will chakra, and the expressing side are two different sides. So you actually receive from one side and you express from the other of the will chakra. So in those two chakras, anyway, those are the most important right now.
Yes. It gets into how Tai Chi is designed in terms of act and receive and all the motions, etc. But just some final words here are something to the tune of this. Life is, always has been, and always will be a drama. I would like to offer. It's like all the world's a stage, Shakespearean kind of mindset. Archetypes, we as souls come in. It's natural by our nature to be moved and inspired and so forth to fulfill a certain kind of destiny, whatever that is, and of course there's just everyday food, clothing, shelter, life, right? And so we don't necessarily think then that this is where it's happening, but actually it is. It's happening in every little motion, right? So you begin to understand that, I'm suggesting here that the journey through the Earth school is such that regardless of the human condition and all the corruptions and all the everything goings on, that's just like par for the course. That's the bunkers and the sand traps and all the other little obstacles in the game. And our job is, includes to, invariably from this deeper understanding that, like it or not, by the way, like it or not, the soul will invariably keep incarnating, and until it has graduated from the Earth school. That's the way that's my paradigm I live by. And this life has its own, of course, great intrinsic value. It's got this principle: be here now, appreciate this, isn't this wonderful, etc. But there's also just living it and trusting that whatever you're doing is probably pretty good, nothing all bad. It's not about comparing. You don't have to live like the neighbors. You get to be you, and that's good. But also that we can bring in, like with the astrology, both philosophically but also more specifically knowledge that helps us to navigate it and kind of come not just to the timing of it, etc., but actually it brings attention to, again, as I said earlier, who you are and why you're here. And once that you get that, you get a hit of that, sometimes all it is deep affirmation. Person goes, that is so me. So people over the years have said to me, in a reading with you, it's like I've been given permission to be me. And I like that. I like that because they feel like they're in their, just like what you do, Mina, in your work, they're in their core. So you do that in your body work, right?
Mm-hmm.
They leave maybe just that much more in their core and able to.
Well, and it's working with cycles.
And cycles.
Yeah.
Working with cycles and coming back to like a point and then continuing and always coming back to the source point or the core, or like in the body work I do, it's an ancient system, right?
Yeah.
Like all ancient systems, they're all working with cycles
Exactly.
and there's this sacred kind of secretion that happens when you're connected to them, that it happens in your body kind of automatically.
Yeah.
Where you're recycling your life force, essentially.
Yes, that's nice. So I appreciate that, and energetically healing to, like there's medicine, there's hospitals for emergencies, there's operations, but there's healing, and healing is that stimulation of the it's more like eating well, right? It's like it can be compared to like eating well in the sense that you're in an optimal state. Right.
And apparently that was what, the whole Christ, when he was reincarnated, like when he was talking about reincarnation, it was all about regeneration, actually.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
It wasn't about going up there. It was about cycling what was inside.
Nice.
I'm just tapping into that right now, the whole sacred thing.
So like in the like the basic cycle of day and night. Day and night is a regeneration cycle. Like day you're out, you're acting, you're in the game, right? Night you sleep, then you awaken, then you rise, then you sleep, right? So we're in day and night cycle.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good example. I just want to add that the same is true of life and death. We have our life, and then we exit this body, this experience. Then the soul says, okay, back in to take on another incarnation and have a new set of experiences. But you really, we need to be here now and enjoy and honor and embrace and accept this. But on the other hand, the tricky thing about this whole conversation really is that to really appreciate that is to realize, oh my God, as we have to think from a soul level, that our soul has taken on all kinds of incarnations. You don't want to get too lost in that, but that is the basic principle. So it's a fine line between being here now, but yeah, it goes back to that. Just we go to various resources available like astrology or like Thai massage and or energy healing, Tyhson, and we clear out and we like we come to a regenerated place and we're fresh again and we feel inspired and we're strong and clear back in the game, right?
I mean, the understanding of the resurrection or the phoenix cycle can occur. We don't necessarily have to wait from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime, that we can do multiple lifetimes in one lifetime, so to speak, if we understand the cyclical dynamics of resurrection and rebirth. So I find it a very, very exciting topic that the more we get into this and understand being in the right place at the right time, which we talked about synchronicity the last time, and then understanding this time about the cycles and reincarnation and allowing that synchronicity to come from lifetime to lifetime, yet also be in this lifetime. I just love the way all the themes just so interrelate. So, Michael, what's coming up next? What's the next topic? Do you know? Have you come to a realization what the next one will be?
As a matter of fact, thanks for asking that. You know what I'd like to do is actually talk about the multidimensional. Like, in other words, I'd like to point attention to where the archetypes originate. I think
Sounds like fun.
we talked a little bit about that last week. So invariably, these conversations overlap a bit. You know, that's just the way it goes. But the more we talk about the origin of the archetypes, it's very exciting, and it kind of brings forward the difference between archetypal interpretation, like through symbols, and then there's systems like astrology, which are symbol systems. Numerology is like that too. And then it even dovetails into whether it's intuition, but also psychic ability, mediumship. All of these start finding where they or how they function within that, by the way. It's rather interesting.
That sounds like a great topic.
Yeah.
It sounds like a great topic, and we're way over the hour. It's been an exciting time yet again. And so until next week, the same time, same place, so you know where to find us. And we'll carry on the conversation. Michael, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for showing up. And thank you for Mina for showing up as a guest and asking some great questions. And hopefully we'll see you next week as well.
Yeah.
So bye for now, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye. Bye, Mina. Good to see you.
Bye-bye.
The Big Picture Show Revealed is sponsored by the Extraordinary Healing Arts Academy, hosted by Facebook Live on the Extraordinary Healing Arts Academy Facebook page, produced by The Wellness Show, www.thewellnessshow.ca, and stay tuned, same place, same time. See you next week. Bye for now.